In the first tarmac stage, I couldn't notice the public's encouragement as much because there was a very strict security system due to the characteristics of the area, but I still felt all the support I had for this rally. And when I reached a neutralization section, in other words, a transport area between two stages, halfway through the second stage, everything was crazy. We had an hour to wait and people began to get into the closed park in any way. Afterwards, they made a military cordon to protect me, but it was no use. And finally, they took me out in the air in a helicopter and put me in a hotel room to wait out the time. And this was happening in every place we stopped. Even when I finished the last stage of the race in La Balle, which was a very small town, when I arrived at the aid station to resupply, the people went crazy. First, they took them out of the Parc Fermé area where Walter's Fiat and mine were. But later, since they were yelling at me so much, I had to get closer to the fence. They started jumping the wire and I had to go quickly back. People carried flags, signs, and boys in their arms to kiss me and greet me in any way. A whole new world for me, which honestly made me very excited, something that I never thought would happen. Leaving at 6 in the morning from Tucumán, I was sure that the first stage to Tafí del Valle would be all night, and unfortunately, that was another advantage I gave because I already knew that the top drivers could make a lot of difference to me at night, walking in the fog or on someone else's land. Remember, it was winter in Argentina. It's a simple matter of experience and habit that I lacked. In that first gravel stage, I took the wrong path in El Molar. What happened to Mirko at that point? I asked, where the climb ended and the most difficult part began, and we also went outside on a curve. I think he means ran a little bit wide there. Well, that's just the English translation. Mirko directly gave me the no more sign, but I don't know where a large group of people appeared and helped us remove the fallen car. So even at that time, in the night, lots of fans out there to push the car back onto the stage so we can continue. In the next stage, we reached Salta without major problems. But at the start of the third, I think we were at 30 kilometers, the fuel pressure went down. The car began to stop, and we immediately notified the helicopter by radio. Of course, in those days, much more expensive, and that's the reason they stopped it all. They used to have helicopters following the cars from each team, and you could service the car immediately if there was a problem. But help arrived very quickly. They changed a hose and I think a filter, and we continued until we met Timo Mäkinen crossing the road because a wheel had come off his car. We were stopped for a long time. Sheikha Mehta even arrived and stopped behind me, and after a while Timo managed to barely move the Peugeot to let us pass. Afterwards, we did the first part of that day, which was very hard because we had to cross a river about 20 times, and in some areas it was quite deep. That's how I ended up in the water once because the engine got wet. Mirko and I had to get out and wait for the thing to dry before continuing. At the end of that stage, I was lying 7th due to all these problems. Tuesday was a rest day. Again, times were different back then. They had a rest day once the rally had started. Again, quite a good thing, isn't it? Leisurely approach. But Carlos lost no time on that rest day. He got into the spare Fiat 131 again. Wouldn't be able to do that today, what they call the muletto. And that was prepared for the team, but Carlos got it. And we hit the road. But just after Banderita, which is a stretch of mountain and where 3 cars pass very closely, I came across a Fiat 125 that was coming the wrong way on my side on a blind corner. I couldn't do anything because I had the mountain on the other side. So we hit each other head on and I couldn't continue. I was a bit worried about this because the passenger in the other car hit his head against the windshield, and it turned out that he was just a guy driving to the next stage to watch me in the rally in the first place. So all very unfortunate. The Fiat people who were following us from the helicopter saw the entire accident. The next day we started the third stage in the proper race car again, which was hard because it had everything, but fortunately nothing strange happened to me. It was a strong drive, we were safe, and I was trying to take care of the tires and the entire car. I think a large part of the rally was defined in this. When Marco Alén and Attilio Bettiger dropped out, Walter Röhrl was uncatchable and Hannu Mikkola was always behind him, going very quickly in the Mercedes. In third place was me, a little further away, but with a fairly safe walk. It's the way Carlos phrased it. Nice. On this stage, I was able to look and follow Röhrl's tracks in the gravel, and I realized that in addition to being the fastest of all, because that day he won 4 stages, he rarely slid while carrying the car a little bit sideways. Very impressive. And I remember Carlos talking about this, and he found a parallel with Ingemar Stenmark, the slalom skier. Very similar in his mind to Walter Röhrl, just the right amount of sliding, not much. He would say it was somewhere between 8 and 10 degrees, not enough to slow you down, but just enough to get the attitude right. Incredible touch. That's what Carlos always tried to find in the Formula One car, and obviously in the rally car as well. I tried to imitate this by following Walter's tracks. Finally then came the Thursday stage where the rally finished, and then the 3 or 4 of us in front ran thinking about the clock, and the kilometers would stop so that everything would end as it was. Mikkola went a bit off script because he went flat out and won 3 of the 4 last stages, but it must also have been because Röhrl was taking care of himself. When I was in Parc Fermé to start this last stage, Sheikha Mehta came up and said with a laugh that I needed to go flat out and I had a real chance to win. But I think it was him just hoping that I would do that and he could get my position by making a mistake or doing something. I replied to Sheikha, no chance of that. I'm going to run this last stage as if it's the last lap of a Grand Prix that I'm about to win. Finally, we left and everything was very normal. There was a lot of dirt on the stage, but everything went well. I only got a little bit worried on the 3rd stage when passing El Portezuelo in an area that is pampa with very fast curves. They were burning the grass on the side of the road, and now we entered a sector of impressive smoke. Nothing could be seen, and in 5th gear I had to brake very hard and continue in 1st, guiding myself along the sideline of the road. It was about 200 meters until everything happened. Later I found 3 calves, baby cows, and I think I touched the last one on the hind legs. Carlos, being a farmer who loved animals, would have been very hurt by that, but I think he makes the point that he just touched it and it was okay. At the end of the prime, they changed a crossbar from the box and also replaced a single wheel bearing, which made a hell of a noise. So I reached the end with the logical joy of my having finished in 3rd place. My conclusions, said Carlos. This is a world as professional as Formula One. I come from the other category, and I can assure you that the difference lies in the physical aspect. In Formula One, there's no doubt that the human effort is much greater. The concentration demands more, brake retardation is very great, and I think the rhythm is critical too. Leaving aside the fact that to be a top driver in both categories you need ability, obviously, which Carlos had in spades, I can assure you that the rally is a matter of getting used to the conditions, adaptation to the car, and always living around this. In other words, it's a profession like any other, and to do it well, to have 10 points, you have to work and prepare 10 points as well. From what I saw in this race, I think that's the case, although apparently Walter Röhrl stands out from the leading group because he drives faster than anybody else. My feeling is that the times are made in the fast sections, as happens in Formula One. You have to come in 5th gear on the dirt or the gravel with the car moving everywhere, and that is difficult. But it's all very nice because the Fiat is a noble car. It's a lovely word the Spanish used, noble, noble, to describe. You can describe your dog as noble, Dexter's noble, or the car can be noble. In other words, it's got dignity and it's a great car. No other word to describe it really. The Fiat is noble, and it therefore allows you to do anything barbaric, including looking at its tail when you pass it on a curve. In other words, get it really sideways, looking at its tail. That is a series of details that Formula One doesn't allow you to do. Another important thing is a navigator. Here it should be 50% because you have to achieve perfect communication with him, and that won't be achieved until at least a year of knowing and working with one another. Before finishing, talk about these points. The car, the team, and the winner. The car is incredible. I doubted its performance over so many kilometers, but they showed me that it is an unbreakable iron. It just never stops. The team is a phenomenon. They came with only 14 mechanics, and they are so organized that they did everything perfectly since no one lacked attention. They didn't think I would play this role either. When I played the second half in the 1st stage, no one understood anything, and a tremendous mess was created in the team. In the 2nd stage, they were also very worried because they thought that I would end the night and the issue of help would become complicated for them. But actually, I arrived shortly after Röhrl, and I think they were somewhat surprised. Finally, a little bit about Walter Röhrl. He's a sensational guy. Anything I asked him, he answered in detail, and he never had a problem telling me anything. I think he's outstanding, a truly great driver. Am I going to run another rally? Today I couldn't say, because by doing it I gave a lot of leeway. To run you would have to do the entire route several times until you're always walking at full speed. Walking at full speed, another Carlosism, lovely. How I ran now is the same as doing the fast corner in Buenos Aires, the Cordovon, with an F1 car and taking my foot off the accelerator. In other words, giving advantage, and I hate doing that. As it happened, Carlos did do the rally again, this time in 1985. He retired from Formula One after the Brazilian Grand Prix 1982. He was now looking at a career potentially in politics. But before he did that, through his friendship with Jean Todt, who he'd met, of course, in the 1980 Rally Côte d'Azur, he arranged to drive a factory Group B 600 horsepower Peugeot 205 16. It was a horrifically dangerous period for rallying. We lost both Henry Toivonen and Attila Bettiger in those Group B cars, and Ari Vatanen had a massive shunt in the 85 Argentine rally, but Carlos nonetheless drove beautifully and again finished third overall, this time at the wheel of a formidable Peugeot 205 16 Turbo. And just to continue that vein, of course, he came back in '84 to Europe to do that Mercedes 2.4 Cosworth 190E race at the Nürburgring, the new Nürburgring, and qualified second, beaten only by Alain Prost, and he qualified ahead of Ayrton Senna. He'd never seen the circuit before, of course, and he was already 2 years into retirement, and he qualified second for that race and finished third behind Senna and Niki. And whilst I say that the British Grand Prix in 1980 wasn't a great Grand Prix for Carlos, we should also remember that that weekend he won the Pro Car race in the BMW M1 at Brands in 1980. So finished third on the podium for the Formula One race, won the Pro Car race in the BMW M1, flew to Argentina and finished third in the Rally Côte d'Azur, round of the World Rally Championship. That's how good Carlos Reutemann was. Immediately after the rally, he wasn't able to enjoy the moment that much. He had to fly back very quickly to test at Brands on the short circuit. Can you think of anything more anticlimactic than having finished third in that rally with all that adulation and just the thrill of driving for the Fiat factory team with Walter and so forth, and then having to go back to an empty Brands hatch to test for Williams? And guess what? The test was foreshortened. There was some sort of gearbox problem, I think I remember, and he didn't do many laps. So the whole thing was a complete waste of time. And then to put it all into chronological context, and this encapsulates, I guess, in many ways, motorsport from that period, 1980. He does the British Grand Prix, he does the rally, he goes back to Brands to do the testing. And then a few days later, Patrick Depailler is killed testing at Hockenheim in the Alfa Romeo when a front tyre goes down. And they're going to put up catch fencing on that long, fast right-hander at the back end of the Hockenheim circuit, virtually flat. But they hadn't got the catch fencing in place for the test, so there was just runoff area and then a guardrail. And a bit like Ayrton Senna, Patrick's left front went straight off through the runoff area and straight into the guardrail, moved the guardrail back, I don't know, about 4 feet. So talk about a vortex of emotions and actions in the life of Carlos in that period. He knew Patrick very well, got on with Patrick very well. So he would have had Brands, yeah, Côte d'Azur, unbelievable, flying back to Brands for the test, and then the news that Patrick had lost his life. And then he had to do the German Grand Prix. So, yeah, just a little moment. You could say a moment in time. Obviously, it was more than just a moment. It was a few weeks. But it was an astounding few weeks. A pivotal few weeks, if you like, in the life of Carlos. But I think it also showed motorsport and historians of motorsport that Carlos Reutemann is without doubt one of the greatest racing drivers of all time, if you take into account everything he did on a racetrack and everything he did on a rally stage as well.
There are very few who have done that. If somebody else did it before, I don't know. I don't think so. We've had a couple of drivers who did Grand Prix, who tried rallying, but it has been more tough. But yeah, that must be a great success. It's like winning IndyCar and Rally Dakar in 2 weekends in a row.